In the other fixture of this year's fifth round FA Cup, we saw an encounter between Coventry City taking on Maidstone United, right? With Coventry City, the home side, winning by 5-0, trashing Maidstone United. The game was already sealed in the first half by the 35th minute when it was already at 3-0, and plus 2 added time goals, stoppage time goals in the second half, sealed an emphatic victory for Coventry City. So Coventry City striker Ellis Simms scored a first half hat-trick to crush Maidstone's dream of a historic FA Cup quarter-final place. So the 6th tier, Maidstone were bidding to become only the second non-league team in 109 years to reach the last 8, having already dispatched English Football League sides Barrow, Stevenage as well as Ipswich Town to actually reach this stage of the FA Cup. The FA Cup tournament of this year, right? So it would have been a remarkable story had Maidstone United been able to achieve this phenomenal dream, right? And doing it away from home would even make it more special. But it was never going to be an easy task. And unfortunately, their dreams came to a crashing end. They came up against the Coventry team, still stinging from their home defeat by Preston in the Championship on Friday. And they were out of the running by the 35th minute, with the returning KC Palmer having a hand in all 3 Simms goals. Fábio Tavares, added 2 more late goals, in the game as Coventry strolled into the quarterfinals for the first time, in over a decade, since 2009, That's basically the first time in 15 years since they've gone to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. And after scoring his first goal, Simms held up a shirt bearing the name of his teammate Tachuhiro Sakamoto, who was taken to the hospital after being carried off a stretcher in that Preston game with an injury that the manager Mark Robbins expects to keep the Japan midfielder out for the rest of the season, unfortunately. But we wish him a speedy recovery. Maidstone provided much of their magic, in the cup this season, not least with their shock victory at Championship promotion hopefuls Ipswich Town, to become the first team outside the top 5 divisions to reach the 5th round, since Blyth Spartans in 1978. So that's basically like over 5 decades or so, basically, since that has actually happened. Yeah, basically over 5 decades. No, under 5 decades. Yes, under 5 decades. Yeah, under 5 decades. Their run, which began at Staining Town Community in September, ended in the West Midlands as Palmer and Simms proved a class above, George Elokobi's men. Remember, George Elokobi was the former Wolverhampton Wanderers and Cameroon defender. What a great player he was during his playing days. And the charismatic manager had taken his team to salute the 4,800 travelling fans before kickoff, but it soon became apparent that Coventry were in no mood to suffer an upset at the hands of the National League South side. With 9 minutes on the clock, Palmer drifted into space in front of the Coventry back 4, and his pass cut through the defence to free Simms to produce in the opening goal of this game. 5 minutes later, the elusive Palmer provided another telling pass, which Simms dumped into the far corner of the net. Palmer once again, he's got a special relationship with the competition for Coventry. His 2 killer passes mean he now has got 3 goals and 4 assists in the FA Cup games for the club. Maidstone tried to hit back, as Liam Sole's dangerous cross was taken off Manu Duku's head by Joel Latibudiare, and Sole himself sliced wide after getting a sided goal. The game was just over. The contest was basically over on 35 minutes. However, as Palmer crashed, in a 25-yard shot that goalkeeper Lucas Kovalan could only parry for Simms to complete his treble and take his tally to 9 goals for the season. There, from that point onwards, the Stones were bold and gave it a go, but were outclassed from start to finish, failing to single an attempt on target. Yeah, it was always going to be a difficult game for the away side. Because Coventry, brought on Callum O'Hare, in the second half, but took their foot off the gas to see the game out, So basically, the game was just won in 35 minutes. In the opening, over half an hour or so into the game was already over. The only threat that Maidstone posed was a sharp passing move that ended with Lena Reynolds shooting into the side netting. Coventry finished with a flourish as substitute Matty Gordon touched the ball through for Tavares to score, with Gordon then having a shot beaten out by Covalan straight to the feet of the Portuguese forward, who tucked away the fifth. So basically, congratulations once again to Maidstone. And George is actually doing a fantastic job, to say the least, George Elokobi, and congratulations to them. But hard luck, next time they will be able to do it, hopefully they can keep on working hard towards actually reaching their goal of securing some promotion, going up the ranks in English football. From this particular round of fixtures in the FA Cup, right, the fifth round, we only saw one victory for a championship side, right, which was basically the victory for Leicester City at the Vitality Stadium, defeating Bournemouth by 1-0. So it was actually a winning goal from Abdul Fatawu, who hit like an extra time stunner to actually send, the Foxes into the FA Cup quarterfinals, right? So, the Emirates FA Cup fifth round tie between Bournemouth as well as Leicester City, at the Vitality Stadium on Tuesday night. It was actually separated from the teenage sensation, Abdul Fatawu's moment of brilliance in extra time, which actually sent, Enzo Maresca's Foxes into the quarterfinals of this year's FA Cup, right? So it was another fairy tale victory for, the 2016 champions, because Leicester City now have booked their place in the FA Cup quarterfinals after a stunning extra time strike from substitute Abdul Fatawu, who earned them a 1-0 victory over Bournemouth on Tuesday night. So it is actually the fourth time in the last 7 seasons, the Foxes who lifted the trophy in the 2020-2021 season, have progressed to the last, 8 of the competition. And again, what should be mentioned is the fact that for long periods, it looked like, Bournemouth would actually be the team to strike first. But despite mastering a whopping 27 shots and just for, disappointingly, just only 4 of those shots were on target, with many other seemingly simple opportunities that were squandered from the home side, and they deserved to lose the game, in fact, because remember, in football, the old saying goes as follows: if you don't capitalize on your chances, you will be eventually punished, and that's exactly what happened to the home side, Bournemouth. So, like I mentioned again, with what I'm going to mention to you guys again is that don't forget the FA Cup quarterfinal draw will take place from 7 p.m. on Wednesday evening. Right, so back to the encounter at the Vitality Stadium. It actually, looked as though, the game would be heading towards a penalty shootout, after a largely, uneventful first period of extra time. So it only took the 19-year-old Fatawu, who popped up with a moment of sheer brilliance that sent the championship leaders through. So Enzo Maresca's men, will find out who their opponents will be for the next round when the draw is actually made on Wednesday evening. And from the perspective of the Cherries, it was a game crying out for top goal scorer Dominic Solanke, who was left out of the squad altogether, an omission addressed by manager Adoni Iraola. In his post-match press conference, he did confirm the fact that Dominic Solanke wasn't feeling well and that he had some issues in the knee. He wasn't actually ready to be involved in the particular encounter, and he actually had an MRI, on Tuesday, just before the game. So, they had to assess him and actually see if he was able to, feature for, the Cherries, but unfortunately he wasn't. So perhaps it's not anything big, right? It's not anything big. It's not really a bad injury, but we hope that he will actually be fine. And we actually, the coach of Bournemouth, he also confirmed the fact that on loan forward, Enes Unal, has been taken to the hospital with something, in his clavicle. So the Turkish international only managed to play, the first half of his full debut since a loan move from Getafe in January. So to actually like lose two of your number 9 strikers in one day is always a bad thing. But for the fact that when you look at the chances that they created, I mean, it's not even an excuse. They should have just put away those chances. They could have won that game, by a huge margin. And you look at for the fact that, sorry for the interruptions. So, for most part of the game, you look at the first half, of, the teams, first ever FA Cup meeting was actually entertaining, perhaps, if only, if it was like for the neutral, because Bournemouth, they generated so much by the break. They just could not find a way through. Most notably, we saw Luis Sinistera. He picked out Alex Scott after an enterprising run on the right-hand side. But the former England under-20 international nonchalantly lifted the ball over the bar with his first touch. And championship leaders, Leicester came close, to actually breaking the deadlock too. Mark Albrighton rattled, the base of the post, with the low shot that had, Mark Travis, beaten. While seconds later, the goalkeeper produced a save for the cameras to deny, Wanya Markal. And Leicester City, they were basically second best after the break. That's why I say Bournemouth should have punished. They should have punished. But with Dominic Solanke rested and not in the squad, Bournemouth lacked a forward, that was capable of converting the numerous chances that they created. Marcos Senesi hit the post with a curling effort early on, right? We also saw the fact that there was so much frustration that in reality, it was as good as it got, because a strong Leicester finish could have been capitalized on by Yunus, Agun, and then the substitute Ricardo Pereira, with both passing up decent chances from close range before extra time began. And you look at the first 15 minutes passed without an incident, but then, there was a moment of magic. Kielichi Iheanacho held the ball up in the penalty area and laid it off to Fatawu, who moved the ball out left with one touch and then curled in a shot that could have, been further in the top left-hand corner if he had tried. From there was no way back for Bournemouth once again. And again, not scoring enough goals is the story for Bournemouth. How many chances do you need to create just to win a game of football? It was a bad day in the office for them because they actually had hopes in the competition. And it's true. They say if you play 120 minutes at home and you have chances, to attack like they had and you don't score a goal, at the end of the day, they deserve to lose the game. Like I said, they do deserve. Because they were very bad in the last third, in the final third. They were very bad. They recovered the ball very high a lot of the times, Even when you look at the last passes, they just didn't decide well. The decision making was very poor. They scored. You look at the fact that Leicester scored from a very difficult position, and that was a top strike, and that's the main reason why Leicester City were able to win. And you look at for Leicester City, Leicester City, I'm sure they could be happy with that fantastic result because, the FA Cup is a fantastic competition. And, when you have that one chance, you just need that one chance to actually win the game of football in the FA Cup. And remember, the league is just as important, but the FA Cup is also as important because, the most important thing for any side, right, is for them just to perform at the highest level. And once again, the performance was good from Leicester City, even though they were dominated, but they still stood their ground. They were resilient enough, and for the fact that they were able to, clinch an unlikely victory, in the FA Cup to actually, secure, promotion to the quarterfinals. So what's actually next for both of these clubs is that Bournemouth will then travel to Burnley, in the first game of a Super Sunday, right, on March the 2nd, and they will actually see the championship leaders. Leicester City will be hosting Londoners Queen's Park Rangers on Saturday as they look to bounce back from last Friday's defeat, to second place Leeds United. So the kickoff will be at 3 p.m., right? Again, sticking with the FA Cup once again, right? So Blackburn Rovers won. Newcastle United, won at Ewood Park. Blackburn Rovers. The former team of Aaron Mokoena, Benny McCarthy. Yeah, man. So yeah, man, we saw Dominic Hyam, he's the one who actually missed the key penalty as, Newcastle United were actually able to, survive an FA Cup scare, and Newcastle had to require a penalty shootout to actually withstand, an inspired Blackburn Rovers at Ewood Park. Anthony Gordon's second half opener was cancelled out by, Sam Asmodic's, sixth FA Cup goal of the season, and Martin Dubravka was actually the hero for the Magpies as he actually saved 2 penalties to actually secure progress for them, right? And how you could actually tell, how you could actually, view this particular encounter was the fact that, look, maybe perhaps there was not much in terms of opportunity. Martin Dubravka, Newcastle's second choice goalkeeper, actually saved 2 penalties as Newcastle, defeated Blackburn Rovers by 4 goals to 3 via penalty shootout, after a 1-1 stalemate in a compelling FA Cup, 5th round tie at Ewood Park on Tuesday evening. And the Newcastle goalkeeper denied Sammy Asmodic's, the goal scorer, as well as Dominic Hiem, from the spot to actually secure a nervy victory after the Premier League outfit were taking all the way, by the side that is languishing in 16th position in the Sky Bet Championship. Kaiser Chiefs, it shows Kaiser Chiefs, Newcastle United, same WhatsApp group. But at least Newcastle were able to get away with it. And what we could say is that at least Newcastle found the back of the net. At least Newcastle, remember, they were playing away from home. So, at least. As for Kaiser Chiefs, I don't know what to say. The less said about Kaiser Chiefs, the better. Blackburn Rovers, enjoyed the upper hand for large spells of the game. They fell behind when Anthony Gordon broke the deadlock after 71 minutes. What a brilliant strike that was. And Rovers, then hit back and actually forced extra time with an equalizer from an impressive Asmodic's. And from that particular moment in time, neither side could actually find a winner before it actually fell to, the lottery of a penalty shootout, to actually determine the outcome of this particular encounter, So, like I said earlier on, the FA Cup quarterfinal draw will take place on, from 7 p.m. on Wednesday. And, as if you're at Newcastle, I don't think you should actually dwell too much on the result. Just dwell more on the performance. Get the performance levels better. Start performing way much better, because you can't be struggling against championship sides, at this level. And considering the level that Newcastle are at currently, you wouldn't expect them to be struggling against Blackburn Rovers. And remember Newcastle had lost, their previous 2 FA Cup, shootouts. So this is the first time winning a shootout, in the FA Cup after 2 times of asking. Remember, they also lost via penalty shootout against Chelsea in the Carabao Cup quarterfinal at Stamford Bridge. And the game was actually delayed by 15 minutes to actually allow all the fans to get into the ground, and was then slow to get going. The first thing of note being a tennis ball protest from Blackburn fans, because they are not really happy with the club's ownership, because the supporters of Blackburn Rovers have been frustrated at the club's continued ownership by the Indian poultry farms, Venky's, which is now in its 14th year, symbolically lobbed balls onto the field in the 14th minute. So the delay was brief. And when the action resumed, it was actually Blackburn who settled quicker. Asmodic's was the main man for Rovers. He was actually the danger man for the home side, and went close when he lashed the shot, into the side netting. We saw with Trace Dolan, broke into the box and drew a good save from Dubravka, whose fingertip touch, deflected, the ball past Asmodic's. And Asmodic's, then tried, his luck from long range, finding only the goalkeeper before beating Fabian Shaw and testing Dubravka again. And, it was just funny, to actually say that the home side were actually looking way much better than the away team, right? The Premier League club. And it's worth also noting that Newcastle United took 7,500 fans with them to Ewood Park. Newcastle really offered very little, before the break, aside from an angle Sean Longstaff strike, which did not really trouble, Ainsley Pierce. And Rovers started the second half, the brighter, and Dolan called Dubravka into action again with a firm strike, from the edge of the area. And I mean, if I'm Eddie Howe as a Newcastle manager, I wouldn't be happy with my team's performance, and we saw he changed tactics, because he had to change the balance just after the hour by actually sending on Miguel Almiron, Luis Miley, as well as Ashley Barnes in a triple change, which perhaps really was not really too effective. It didn't really prove too effective. But yes, the Magpies, began to take control, and Blackburn had to scramble clear, after Kieran Trippier's header was blocked on the line. Longstaff headed, over from a corner, and then Gordon, should have actually done better, than to actually shoot straight at Pierce, after being played through. But Gordon at least made amends, for that, woeful miss, for the fact that he actually made a breakthrough 19 minutes from time, calmly striking home the ball after a good run and a neat cutback from Almiron. It actually felt harsh, very harsh on Blackburn Rovers, because Blackburn Rovers were far the better team than Newcastle United. But they chose not to lie down, It was a matter of, it's either they accept, they lie down or accept defeat, or, But what we actually saw is that none of those. We actually saw the hosts, they continued to rally on. They rallied on. Newcastle's lead only lasted for 8 minutes, as we saw Arnold Sigurdsson, broke down the right, as well as he picked out Dele Makende, who thumped the first time shot against the bar, and Asmodix was the quickest to actually react, to the rebound. Cooley guided the bouncy ball into the net, and shockingly, Rovers, were almost close to snatching a victory at the death, as Yassine Ayari's deflected shot was saved by Dubravka with his legs. So, yeah, man, Blackburn, that was a great immediate response from them. And Newcastle also had the first opportunity in extra time, but Pierce, produced a brilliant double save to deny Gordon as well as Longstaff at, close range, And the visitors looked certain to actually score in the 112th minute when Gordon, broke into the box and the ball was squared to Bruno Guimaraes, but Scott Wharton miraculously blocked on the line. And as Modix, had another chance at the other end, but again, Dubravka was alert, That's the thing when you have a world-class goalkeeper like Dubravka, because, it was actually Dubravka who proved to be the hero in the shootout. And although it went to the final kick after Barnes had his effort saved, as he actually tipped over Hayam's shot onto the post. So what you can actually say is that Blackburn, is that it's a team that is really improving every day. They're improving day by day, and that was a massive performance against Newcastle United, right? So, Blackburn have to turn their attention to the championship as Newcastle do advance to the quarterfinals of the season's FA Cup. So Blackburn will actually visit Swansea on Saturday as they actually look to ease their relegation worries in the championship, on Saturday, right? And then Newcastle will be hosting Wolverhampton Wanderers in the Premier League on Saturday, as they look to bounce back from their humbling defeat to Arsenal last weekend at the Emirates. Yeah. Yeah, defending champions. That's what defending champions do, ladies and gentlemen. We cross to the FA Cup. We cross straight to the FA Cup. That's what defending champions do. That's what defending champions do. And Manchester City did that in style, trashing Luton Town away from home 6-2. So it was like basically Luton Town 2, Manchester City 6. And guess what? Erling Haaland scored 5 goals to actually send the FA Cup holders into the quarterfinals. So basically, the Norwegian, he hit a 40-minute hat-trick while Kevin De Bruyne assisted 4, of his 5 goals. And now the FA Cup holders now reach the quarterfinals to remain on course to repeat last season's treble, right? Is it possible if they can do that? I'll wait to see this. I really want to see it, but is it possible that they can do a treble this season? Because I would really love Newcastle. I would really love Liverpool to actually secure the quad treble, right? Yeah, the quad treble. You understand? In Jurgen Klopp's final season, but we wait to see that. Because now, remember Manchester City now, the Norwegian Erling Haaland, It was again another 40-minute hat-trick, before scoring twice in the second half for his second 5-goal performance, at City. After pulling off the same feat against RB Leipzig in the UEFA Champions League last season, remember that. So Haaland's first 4 goals, at Kenilworth Road, were all assisted by KDB, none other than who? KDB, Kevin De Bruyne. As City's deadly duo, were in fine form ahead of Sunday's Premier League derby against Manchester United. So, yeah, man, some much-needed results there, man. Some much-needed confidence needed for the players, man. Much needed. And you look at it, right? Obviously, the FA Cup quarterfinal draw will take place from 7 p.m. On Wednesday evening. And Mateo Kovacic, again, he actually scored Manchester City's 6th goal, in a victory which actually keeps Pep Guardiola's side on course to actually repeat last season's treble, with City just a point off Premier League leaders Liverpool, while they are set to actually reach the Champions League quarterfinals once again, okay? And with that being said, despite the fact that, City raced into a 3-0 lead, Luton did threaten an incredible comeback, as we saw Jordan Clark, actually scoring a brace to actually make it 3-2, including a stunning first goal from outside the box, which was the pick of the 8 goals. And you look again, Haaland hit his 4th. He hit his 5th goal in a space of 3 minutes to actually end the hopes of a memorable, turnaround and actually make it 18 games unbeaten for Manchester City in basically all competitions, right? So Manchester City now are unbeaten in 18 games in all competitions. And that was again another 5-star performance from Erling Haaland, at Luton Town, to actually send Manchester City into the FA Cup quarterfinals. And what I can say is that the key players were able to read the game perfectly. The connection between KDB as well as Erling Haaland was actually so great. But from my point of view, I think everybody really contributed, And yeah, it's congratulations to Manchester City for advancing to the quarterfinals once again. And Erling is just a guy, with the vision. He has got the quality, he has got the generosity. And, Kevin De Bruyne, the less said about him, selfless player. You understand? Selfless player, always a team player, providing the assists. And you know what we do? Erling Haaland, we rely on him to actually deliver the finished product. You understand? The final product. And, Kevin De Bruyne is just a kind of a player that he just needs Erling Haaland to make some movement. All you just need is for Erling Haaland just to make movement of the ball in order for Kevin De Bruyne to actually play those key passes. And every pass was very good, was clinical, was so, superb, spectacular. The finishing from Erling Haaland was, just, remarkable. You understand? And they could have actually scored more because remember Manchester City had 2 or 3 more chances. One against, remember one which, with Crew, but the players actually read the game really well and they actually did it perfectly. So that again, with that being said, that is now Erling Haaland, he's now scored 8 hat-tricks for Manchester City, right? So this particular hat-trick against Luton in the FA Cup was his 8th Manchester City hat-trick, right? And look, man, Erling Haaland, cannot be stopped. Irregardless of injury, yes, he came from an injury, but look at that, man. The man he's still going. He still has it in him. And look, Erling Haaland now, to set the record straight, Erling Haaland has got 79 goals in 83 appearances for Manchester City in all competitions since he made his debut in July 2022, and at least 30 more than any other Premier League player during that time. Mohamed Salah is the one who's next to him with 49. So that is just absolutely remarkable, to say the least. Just absolutely remarkable. And again, Haaland's 5-goal performance, commenced in the 3rd minute as, Matheus Nunes, played in De Bruyne, who then pulled a cross back for Haaland to thump home, first time inside the box. The pair then combined again in the 18th minute of the game, as they played a 1-2 with De Bruyne, releasing Haaland, who powered into the Luton box and coolly finished through the legs of Tim Krul. And again, coming into this particular encounter, Luton actually made 3 changes to the team that actually lost against Liverpool last week. As we saw, the much experienced goalkeeper Tim Krul replaced Thomas Kaminski. And while Reece Burke as well as Jordan Clark came in for Gabriel Osho, as well as Albert Sambi Lukonga. again. And then Manchester City named Erling Haaland, Kevin De Bruyne, and Jack Grealish in a strong starting 11. So you could tell that what Pep Guardiola's intentions were. His intentions was just to be ruthless. And certainly they were ruthless. And then from that point onwards, we saw Pep Guardiola made 4 more changes from Saturday's win, at Bournemouth, as we saw De Bruyne, Grealish, Kyle Walker, as well as goalkeeper, Stefan Ortega, came in for Edison, Ruben Diaz, Rodri, as well as Phil Foden, respectively. And, it was such, a classy, quality, a devastating performance from Manchester City. Erling Haaland's hat-trick was complete in the 40th minute, as, he perfectly, timed his run to actually pick up Kevin De Bruyne's through ball and chip over the on-rushing Tim Krul. And it was a devastating first half from Manchester City. A devastating first half, which, was punctured by the loss of Jack Grealish to injury once again, with the England international visibly upset after only recently returning from a groin issue. I don't know what to say, man, because, injuries are now becoming a common trend with Jack Grealish. This again, he's been injured, because we haven't heard any reports from the doctor, but he is feeling another groin once again, and it has actually been a tough season for Jack Grealish. So he'll have to, we wish him a speedy recovery, and hopefully he can actually help the team when he's able to actually return, for Manchester City. And again, Luton, from that particular moment in time, were given a hope of an incredible comeback. That was basically a fairy tale comeback, if it was going to happen. When Clark actually fired in a wonderful strike into the top corner on the stroke of halftime. And then we also saw the midfielder, then scored his second as he lashed into the near post, like it was just the near post, right, in the 52nd minute of the game, to actually get the home fans dreaming of an almighty comeback, a fairy tale comeback. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. It would have been emphatic if that was to happen, to say the least. It would have been emphatic, but reality, just hit. Once again, it bit them just 3 minutes later. As we saw, Haaland tapped in home for his 4th, as De Bruyne unselfishly, squared the ball to him, right? And that's exactly Kevin De Bruyne, man. Kevin De Bruyne, 3 assists for Erling Haaland against Luton in the FA Cup, is the first time a Premier League player has provided 3 assists for one player in any competition since Diogo Jota, did so for Mohamed Salah against Rangers in the UEFA Champions League, just a few seasons ago for Liverpool. So, what an incredible performance from Kevin De Bruyne. And Haaland grabbed his 5th 3 minutes later, with Bernardo Silva, the provider, as he slipped in the 23-year-old who fired a low shot that scrummed under Tim Krul, for 5 goals in 58 minutes. City finally had a different goal scorer in the 72nd minute, as we saw Mateo Kovacic, riffle the shot from distance that flew past, Tim Krul, to actually cap off a fine display from Pep Guardiola's side ahead of the final, few crunch months of the season. Yeah, Manchester City is a ruthless team, ladies and gentlemen. That's all I can just say to y'all. Manchester City is so ruthless. Whoa, Jesus, devastating, man, devastating. Because you look at you look at Erling Haaland as well as Kevin De Bruyne. They are just getting, towards their best form following their injuries. Remember the pair, stayed in the away win at Luton, in the FA Cup 5th round, and they've been injured. They've been on the sidelines for quite some time. So now their return is actually proving to be so much effective for Manchester City. Jesus Christ. And it is. And I'm going to say to y'all, most teams should actually be afraid. They should be afraid. And, Manchester United fans at home, wherever you guys are. Oh my goodness. Because it's the Manchester Derby, right? On the 3rd of March, Sunday. And guess where it's going to be played? At the Etihad. That's what's next for Manchester City. And remember what happened last season, Manchester United fans? Remember what happened last season? I don't have to give you guys a reminder. And as for Luton will host Aston Villa in the Premier League, obviously at Kenilworth Road, in form Aston Villa. So it just doesn't get easy for Luton, man. It does not get easy for them at all. It doesn't. Yeah, once again, Liverpool. Yeah, ne. This team just never ceases to amaze me. And what I just witnessed is the fact that Liverpool's youngsters, they once again impressed. They won 3-0 against Southampton in the fifth round FA Cup at Anfield, and the youngsters really did impress me. To say the least, I was very impressed by the youngsters. And one thing that I'm also amazed is the fact that how Jurgen Klopp actually trusts these young players, because now Liverpool are through, to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup after the club's youngsters. They once again impressed in a 3-0 victory against Southampton. Southampton they threatened early on, and Liverpool could consider themselves fortunate not to have actually found it, themselves behind, during the opening 15 minutes. We saw Kamaldeen Sulemana, he hit the post while Conmin Kelleher was called on in action on a couple of occasions. And the young Reds, eventually began to grow in the game. Albeit, without really testing Joe Lumley, in the Southampton goal. We saw Harvey Elliott was actually the first, to call the Southampton goalkeeper into action before Louis Koumas struck his first senior goal just before the break to actually give the host the lead. And you look at the Carabao Cup final, the fact that this Liverpool side, this very same Liverpool side with youngsters were able to beat Chelsea with teenagers. Academy players were able to beat a Chelsea squad that cost over £1 billion. It's just incredible. Although back into this game, chances were few and far in between, in the second half. And, Shea Charles spurned a golden opportunity as he somehow managed to turn his shot wide, in acres of space. He was actually made to pay dearly moments later when Jayden danced, fresh from terrorizing Chelsea's defenders in the Carabao Cup final. He produced one of the coolest of finishes from Harvey Elliott's ball for his first senior goal. And he was at the double when he pounced on Lumley's save from Conor Bradley to actually make sure that Liverpool secure a safe passage into the quarterfinals of the FA Cup once again. And Liverpool, I'm sure they will be taking against Manchester United, because a tie against Manchester United now awaits the Reds next month in the quarterfinals, And, they are on a quest for a quadruple. So basically Liverpool really, have got so much work to do, but the fight, what they're actually doing with their young players is so incredible, because you look at one man. I want us to actually pay close attention on Joe Gomez. He's basically the man for all the roles, having actually witnessed the fact that Joe Gomez, came on as a right back and Conor Bradley moved further forward, at Wembley Stadium just a fortnight ago. The vast majority of the fans would no doubt, even myself, I wouldn't even doubt the fact that, I've been expecting the same, from the manager, Jurgen Klopp, because he always keeps you guessing, You saw in this particular encounter against Southampton, Gomez actually took an unfamiliar role in the midfield, while Bradley, took his usual spot, at right back. So what you could actually take from that particular, scenario is the fact that, Klopp wants to get Bradley in as a right back now as much as he can. And remember, Trent Alexander-Arnold isn't set to return until, after next month's international break. Either that or he's giving Gomez every opportunity to get that first Liverpool goal. And having already played every position in the back for this season, Gomez now, he seems to be slowly moving further up the field. And remember, what's incredible is that he has made over 250 appearances for the Reds and he has never found the back of the net. But you can't blame me, he's a defender. So currently, what I'm also assuming is the fact that in the Premier League game against Wolves, perhaps they might even play Gomez further forward. You understand? I'm thinking they're going to play, Gomez further forward. And you look at the fact that, with Southampton, on paper, Southampton, yes, they are a championship opponent, but on the pitch, they were tough, because it looked every bit of a Premier League side. Remember, this was a team that was relegated last season. They were, of course, in the English top flight last season, just less than a year ago. And they are in the running to make an immediate return. And you can certainly see why they are positioned near the top of the table, having posed, plenty of problems for Liverpool. And based on what you could see, what they demonstrated at Anfield, you could certainly argue for Southampton, looking better than either Burnley or Sheffield United, this season. And it probably won't be wrong. It probably won't be a long time where, you'll either see, Russell Martin's side back, at Anfield next season, because we all know, obviously, every team has to play at the Anfield in the Premier League, right? So you play a home and away game. And again, Jurgen Klopp, another masterclass from him. Because you look at Lewis Koumas, what a moment it was for him. Because from being named on the bench and actually picking up a winner's medal on Sunday, right? And he scored his first senior goal just a couple of days later. And it has been an incredible week for him, to say the least. And that's what I can actually take from this particular game, because Jurgen Klopp really loves his youngsters. He trusts them so much, And as to how he was even able to identify the Wales under-19 international as a potential star, it's incredible. And I can actually identify him as such, because you look at how physically, he's already there. He's got all the things that you need from a youngster to actually become a real player. And he's got the speed, he's got the technique, he's got, the shooting ability. And, you can tell that the 18-year-old, has certainly delivered on the, on expectations. Hopefully myself as well as the Liverpool fans and, all football lovers across the world will get to see more of the youngster. And, it actually took a while for Liverpool to actually get going against Southampton, surprisingly. And after a nervy opening 15 minutes, though, the young Reds began to find their feet. Not only were they but, you look at the fact that they were hot on the press. They were very hot on the press, and it became such a trademark of Klopp's side. James McConnell, Bobby Clark in particular, gave their opponents barely any time to actually breathe as they looked to pounce on the visitors playing from the back, because the visitors were always playing from the back, right? And you could tell that Liverpool, their intention was, let us pounce on that. You understand? Because let us force these guys to actually make some errors, to make some mistakes. And it's a testament to, what has been built at Kirkby, over the years, that these young players can come into the senior side and instantly fit into the club system. The future is bright indeed for these Liverpool youngsters. But what I'm more concerned about is I'm wondering the next guy who comes in and coaches, Liverpool, will he be able to replicate what Jurgen Klopp has managed to do with these young players from Liverpool, these academy players, and now making them become world-class players? I'm just wondering, because another thing is that, you look at that brilliant finish from Jayden to actually grab his first senior goal for the club. The composure that came with it, which, he lifted the ball over Joe Lumley, was that of a seasoned professional player. And he showed great tenacity for his second as well. He's certainly done a lot to actually impress, since making his debut against Luton just over a week ago. Harvey Elliott laid the assist for the first goal, and he made sure, to actually give him his moment in front of the Kop as he pushed him away to soak, up the adulation. He might well be celebrating in front of that stand a lot more often in the future. And I can tell you that for a fact, because, I hope for the fact that it might be Xavi Alonso who coaches this young Liverpool side, but I hope he can be able to replicate, what Klopp has managed to do at this Liverpool team. And for the fact that, he has had a great season at Bayer Leverkusen, and they are well on course to actually, win the German Bundesliga. And they are the only side that is unbeaten in Europe's top five leagues. So, wow, wow. That's all I can just say, man. It's incredible, right? And Liverpool's injury updates is the fact, and the return dates. We've actually received the reports with regards to Darwin Núñez as well as Mohamed Salah. And I can actually confirm for you that Mohamed Salah is out for the game against Nottingham Forest. But it is said that, the two key players could return very soon afterwards, right? Because remember, after 2 cup games, one of them was a final. Liverpool, they will be back in familiarity of the league action, this weekend. And they will be traveling to the south to actually face Nottingham Forest in the Premier League. Liverpool, they haven't been in league action, since their 4-1 home win against Luton Town on the 21st of Feb. And a win is actually an imperative if the Reds are to keep the pace. at the top of the table, with both Arsenal and Manchester City just lurking behind, right? So for Jurgen Klopp, the injury crisis at the club shows no sign of abating. With as many as 13 players still out with one injury or another, for the cup victory against Southampton, the German, you could see he turned to so many of his talented youngsters in his academy, and they responded to the call in spectacular fashion. And now as for Klopp, he may need to use some of those youngsters for the game against a struggling Forest, albeit with many of them starting from the bench, at the City ground rather than, most of them starting at the first whistle. And that would be not a bad thing, based on, recent evidence to actually give his youngsters a chance to actually play, to feature against Nottingham Forest. However, Klopp may have some good news, and Darren Núñez as well as Dominic Szoboszlai, who were both rested for the game against Southampton, that 3-0 victory in the FA Cup, they could be in contention, for the game against Forest, as they actually make their way back from respective muscle, injuries. While as for Mohamed Salah, it will take slightly longer before he's ready to return. So yes, at least that's a massive boost for Jurgen Klopp. But the Dutchman Ryan Gravenberch, he's definitely out for the Forest game after Klopp confirmed that he is injured. He injured his ligaments, during Sunday's Carabao Cup final, and the Liverpool boss has suggested that it could have been much worse. So, the sooner he's able to recover, and it looks very unlikely for him to return immediately, Gravenberch, but Klopp will also hope to, have his Japan international Endo, ready for the weekend's clash at Nottingham Forest. The former Stuttgart midfielder left Wembley in a protective boot, but was seen back, at the training center on Monday without it, and he wasn't risked at all, against Southampton, but he should be fit enough to actually feature in some capacity against Forest, but it is basically unknown when Gravenberch will be returning to action for the Reds. But what I can say is that Endo, he might feature, against Nottingham Forest. As for Mohamed Salah, Darwin Núñez, as well as Dominic Szoboszlai, Salah, Núñez, and Szoboszlai were in risk against, Southampton, in midweek. And it was actually thought that the trio could feature against Nottingham Forest, over the weekend. But, Jurgen Klopp has actually ruled Salah out for the game. So yeah, it is confirmed, but the return dates, maybe Núñez and Szoboszlai could feature, and then maybe Salah will feature against Sparta Prague in the Europa League. As for Alisson Becker, Trent Alexander-Arnold, as well as Curtis Jones, Alisson, Alexander-Arnold, and Jones are still quite a bit away from returning to the squad. Pep Linders confirmed before the Carabao Cup final that all three are not set to return until the March international break, with Jones the only one in chance of making it, back slightly earlier, so it will be near enough April before we see them again. And Klopp's latest update, on Alisson was that he could not be back for a while yet. So that injury is rather serious, but he should be back before the end of the season. Perhaps, the game against Brighton on March the 31st. Or as for Alisson, it could be longer than that. So we'll actually see. We'll see more on that. We wait to see more on that. As for Diogo Jota, we haven't seen him in action as much. Diogo Jota faces an even longer spell on the sidelines than Alisson, Jones, as well as Alexander-Arnold, because the Portuguese international, he suffered a medical ligament, a medical ligament injury in that 3-1 victory over Brentford, and the 27-year-old certainly won't be back until, after the March international break, and may even remain out for a while longer after that. So there's no actually any concrete time frame as to when he will be returning to action, And Steven Bajcetic, Bajcetic, has missed the vast majority of the campaign. He only just featured a couple of games earlier on, and you look at the young midfielder, he's still not back in full training. Although Klopp has admitted to being confused over his situation and potential return date. So, it is actually not yet sure when he will be returning to action, but, he will be out for a long time, yeah. But he's actually doing well. He's getting there, he's actually recovering, but I think he'll be out for longer than March. And last but not least, Thiago Alcantara, Joel Matip, as well as Ben Doak, Thiago and Matip may have, played their last games of the season, and therefore perhaps their last games for the club, with both their contracts expiring at the end of the current campaign. Klopp confirmed that the former, could actually miss the rest of the season, ahead of the Southampton game. So, yeah, man, it's one of those ones. It's actually one of those, but, we wait to see. We hope for the best news, indeed. So, in the other FA Cup, fifth round clash, we head straight to the City Ground, where we saw Nottingham Forest take on last season's runners-up, Manchester United, right? So it was a 1-0 victory for the Red Devils, as Casemiro was the man on target who actually headed in a late header, as the Red Devils secure FA Cup quarterfinal spot once again. So Manchester United had to leave it very late, to actually beat Nottingham Forest by a 1-0 at the City Ground and actually seal their place in the last 8 of the FA Cup. So Erik Ten Hag's side, had been left frustrated in their efforts, to actually break down the hosts until Casemiro popped up with a late-headed goal, which was actually approved after a lengthy VAR check. And the Red Devils, now they look set to meet Liverpool in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. And that's going to be an incredible clash, So Casemiro's 89th minute, winner gave Manchester United a 1-0 victory at Nottingham Forest at the City Ground in the FA Cup on Wednesday evening. And to say the least, it was pretty much of a disappointing affair, to say the least, yes. But after a disappointing defeat to Fulham, at Old Trafford over the weekend, United were actually looking, to stay in the hunt for their last remaining chance of a trophy this season. While Nottingham Forest, would have hoped to continue their good run under Nuno Espirito Santo. And Anthony hit the woodwork. We saw the away side. Manchester United had an early opportunity through Anthony. He hit the woodwork earlier on. And Scott McTominay had 2 good chances. While Taiwo Awoniyi, looked very dangerous for Forest up front. And Nottingham Forest, they did threaten so many times on the break, right? So, both sides did create some meaningful chances. That's what we saw, and that was actually good for football, because it's one thing we expected. This is a tournament game. This is a cup game of 2 Premier League, clubs clashing at the City Ground. And, in the second half, neither side actually had a cutting edge, with the goalkeepers up to task, and extra time loomed with the result needed to decide which team would face Liverpool in the next round. Obviously, we all wanted a Liverpool versus Manchester United clash because we know, the history. We know the rivalry between those two sides. And imagine in a quarterfinal of an FA Cup, imagine in the tournament, it's actually going to, be an incredible encounter, to actually look forward to, because for both teams, they would have not have wanted extra time, as Manchester United will be preparing for Manchester City and Forest are scheduled to host Liverpool over the weekend. And it was Man United who actually forced the result when Captain Bruno Fernandes, threaded in a dangerous cross, which was glanced in by Casemiro's header for the winning goal. And you look at how, basically this victory eases off the pressure on Erik Ten Hag. But the question is, for how long, ladies and gentlemen? For how long? Because, yes, a win for Manchester United now sets them up with the quarterfinal clash against Liverpool, which is going to be a huge game for them. And if Erik Ten Hag, can end the season with a trophy and positive momentum, then the pressure will be off. But if he loses heavily at the weekend against Manchester City, then it will result in questions being asked once again. Because the FA Cup means more to Manchester United this season than it has done for some time, right? Because right now, they now stand the risk of not winning any silverware, right? Definitely they're not going to win the Premier League. They're out of the Champions League. Yes, they lost the Carabao, which to eventual winners Liverpool, who they will be facing. And Liverpool are also aiming for the quadruple. So, it's actually going to be very tense, right? And congratulations to Bruno Fernandes for man of the match, and not really his best by any means, but, he was very determined. It was an actually determined and passionate performance, which actually, sent in, as we saw him sending, countless shots and crosses, eventually one of them, did lead to a goal, right? Did, prove to be more meaningful for the side. And, congratulations once again to Manchester United, for actually, progressing to the next round. Congratulations for them, man. Last but not least, that's basically, to say the least, that is basically the best way to bounce back. That's how you bounce back, Blues. That's how you bounce back. Chelsea, 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 Chelsea. That's how you bounce back, man. And yes, Chelsea 3, Leeds United 2 in the last, game of the fifth round of the FA Cup, right? So Chelsea will be setting up an encounter. And let me just be honest with you, right? This particular game was very tough, to say the least. It was not as straightforward as you guys would have loved to have believed. Because, look, yes, Conor Gallagher, the lifesaver for Chelsea, because he's the one who scored the last-minute winning goal as Chelsea snatched, a dramatic victory over Leeds United to actually move into the FA Cup quarterfinals. It was indeed a thrilling fifth round, tie at Stamford Bridge. And it looked to actually be heading in towards extra time before... Yes, Conor Gallagher was free in the penalty area and lifted the finish past Ilan, Meslier, right? And that was, an important victory for Chelsea, right? And that's the best way for them to actually bounce back, after that, following that, 1-0 Carabao Cup final defeat to, Liverpool. And this actually keeps, Chelsea's hopes of winning a trophy alive, right? Because Mauricio Pochettino's side, will return to Wembley for the FA Cup semi-finals. That's if they win at home against championship leaders Leicester City in the last 8, in March. And remember, the Argentine, began his role as the manager in July and felt the performances were improving, but the squad needed just more time, right? So what can I say? In the past few weeks, Chelsea have been doing so well. Yes, there's unity. I can see there's unity, man. There's unity amongst the team. You can see the performances are actually improving, and yeah, the expectations are very massive for this Chelsea team. So it's very important for Pochettino and co to actually build confidence and actually, build that chemistry amongst the players. More importantly, in order for them to get those much needed results. Because yes, Chelsea fell behind early on, when a defensive error led to Mateo Joseph scoring his first senior goal as Leeds went on ahead, after just only 9 minutes of the game. And the visitors, second in the second tier were only leaders for only just 6 minutes. They only led the game for 6 minutes because we saw Nicholas Jackson now, he made it 1-1, with the low strike from a Moses Caicedo pass before Mykhailo Mudryk, gave Chelsea a 37th minute lead, sweeping in Raheem Sterling's pullback into the bottom corner. So now, as I'm saying, for the Senegalese striker, Nicholas Jackson, he has now scored 10 goals for Chelsea since moving from Villarreal for £32 million last summer. And yet again, Leeds United were the better team at the start of the second half and got a deserved equalizer as Joseph, grabbed his second goal with the header at the back post, to actually connect with Jayden Anthony's, excellent cross. And Anthony, could not convert 2 chances, to put the visitors ahead, before substitute Gallagher, proved to be the match winner. And yes, that was a great, important victory for Chelsea because the under fire Chelsea, they did really battle for the victory. Because remember, Chelsea won the Champions League in 2021 and then followed that up by clinching both the UEFA Super Cup as well as the FIFA Club World Cup. But they only finished 12th in the Premier League in the 2022-2023 season, failing to qualify for any European tournament. And currently they are now 11th this season. And they are in danger of missing out on continental football again for the 2024-2025 season. Provided that the results start going their way in the Premier League and provided that they actually win the FA Cup, because Chelsea have actually spent more than €1 billion on transfer fees since the consortium led by American investor, Todd Bowley and private equity firm Clear Lake Capital bought the club in May 2022. That's why I say, politics should never interfere with football, but it is what it is. Chelsea just gotta get on with it and keep on winning because they've already spent so much money on so many players. And, their players were heavily criticized for the manner of their Carabao Cup final loss against, a youthful Liverpool side. And even ex-Manchester United and ex-England, defender Gary Neville, called Chelsea the blue billion, pound bottle jobs, because Pochettino even felt that comment, was so harsh. And he added that Neville was just frustrated because Liverpool won another title. And he said that it's not fair to actually accuse people in that way with the team that is very young. So his side, would have faced more criticism if they had gone out of the FA Cup. But despite being outplayed for large parts of the second half against Leeds, a Leeds outfit that performed excellently, you could actually say that the hosts, finally they were able just to get the job done. And what I can say is that, Chelsea, yes, the final was a big loss for them, but at least, they were just able to, progress to the FA Cup quarterfinals and give them an opportunity to clean some silverware, which is really needed to save their season. Their much disappointing season. And Mateo Josephs, he scored twice for Leeds United, and it only came in only his third start for the club. So that was an important victory for the Blues, man. And yes, they will be facing Leicester City, in the FA Cup quarterfinals at the same ground, the Stamford Bridge.